What kind of corpse could scare a forensic scientist with 20 years of experience and even infect him with corpse poisoning after the autopsy? The Nehe case in Heilongjiang. This is a case that will overturn your understanding. 53 bodies were stacked layer upon layer in a vegetable cellar. Some of the bodies inside had rotted to skeletons. Some were swollen and fermenting like balloons. The smell was so strong that even masks couldn't block it. The highly decomposed bodies leaked green fluids. There was no clean spot in the cellar to even step down. People had to step on the pile of bodies to move around. The feeling under the feet of the dead was very peculiar, like standing on a swamp. A slight misstep could make you fall into the wet mud. The cruel details of this case date back to 1990, also the year when Heilongjiang had a strange rumor. If you don't want to live, go to Nehe, because that year Nehe had many disappearance cases, city businessmen, often carrying a lot of cash. The man causing all this was called Jia Wen, originally a worker at a parts factory in Nehe, fired due to inappropriate relationships, later turned to butchering cattle for a living. Those who knew him commented, "Handsome, more a star than a butcher." Underneath the handsome appearance lay a sinister heart. No one knows why Jia Wen first committed the crime. Some say it was out of poverty, for money, others say for the thrill. But if you ask me, maybe he just did it because he felt like it, like we eat when hungry or bathe when dirty. Jia Wen's first victim was Chang. In the victim's home, he strangled him and took his wallet as a souvenir. Details of Jia Wen's crimes are rarely recorded. I don't know the specifics, partly because the police feared imitation, so they weren't widely publicized. On the other hand, Jia Wen didn't talk much. After all, the crimes he committed were beyond redemption. Whether he spoke or not, he was to die, so he simply kept his mouth shut. The only thing we know is, from the first time he acted to killing 53 people, Jia Wen took just 1 year. The information we have is mostly from Xu Li, Jia Wen's accomplice. In fact, he was originally intended to be victim number 21. From his first crime, Jia Wen enjoyed the feeling. He'd loiter near the train station when in a bad mood and target anyone who looked suitable. Rape first, then murder, then rob them of everything. Xu Li came here to clear her head after an argument with her husband and unfortunately encountered Jia Wen. Jia Wen's usual method was to use his good looks to gain trust. Then he'd lure the victim to his home, pretending to be a candy factory owner. Once there, he would strangle them. Initially, he'd leave the bodies where they fell, but fearing it was too risky, he cleared out his own vegetable cellar and started dumping the bodies there. By the time he tried to kill Xu Li, the cellar was already full of bodies. When he killed Xu Li, the cellar was already full of bodies, but very luckily, Xu Li survived. He was only knocked unconscious. Jia Wen didn't check and just threw him down. He was awakened by a foul smell in the dark. With the faint light, Xu Li saw bodies everywhere around him. He went mad with fear, desperately climbing upward, turning over several bodies to find out whose head. He grabbed the ladder. That's how he crawled out from among the dead. After coming out, Jia Wen was outside, watching him impatiently, seeming not in a hurry to act, but gave him 2 choices. Help me or I'll throw you back in. Many things are more terrifying than death. Like going back into that cellar, Xu Li agreed. He was very beautiful. Otherwise, Jia Wen wouldn't have picked him from a crowd so quickly. And now this beauty became an accomplice to the devil, helping Jia Wen lure those passing businessmen. Jia Wen's method of operation was uninhibited, almost completely random in selecting targets, looking at someone who seemed wealthy and luring them to his home, then brutally murdering them and plundering all their wealth. Using this method, Jia Wen lived a very luxurious life, which allowed his crime syndicate to expand again, growing to 5 people, each with different skills. The other 3 were volunteers. With this gang of henchmen, Jia Wen became even more deranged and quickly killed dozens more. He also believed that eating the organs of his victims could enhance his virility, so each of his subsequent victims had their hearts and livers removed, cooked, and eaten. Jia Wen even cut off a man's testicles to drink with. His list of crimes is so long, it would take days and nights to recount. On October 23, 1991, Xu Li and Jia Wen were arrested by the police while out on a crime, and this major case was finally cracked. But the most difficult task was still to come, identifying the victims. Jia Wen's home cellars were completely filled with bodies. Out of necessity, he had dug another pit next to it, 6 meters deep and no more than a meter long. The width was only 55 centimeters, and it too was filled halfway. Some of the bodies were dismembered because the space was too small. Equipment couldn't fit inside. Forensic scientists had to go in themselves, crawling into this small hole, turning over the bodies and tying them up so the people outside could pull the bodies to the surface. The stench was so bad they wanted to cut off their noses. At first, the forensic scientists wore gas masks, but they soon realized the masks were useless. The stench penetrated their brains. It was already dark, and wearing gas masks was very inconvenient, so eventually, they simply took off the masks. Ultimately, with the joint efforts of 10 forensic scientists, all the bodies were finally cleared out. According to investigations, 53 people died at Jia Wen's hands, but from the last 2 cellars found, only 49 people could be pieced together, and the cost was extremely heavy. Several forensic scientists were poisoned by the decay, their lungs infected by bacteria from the bodies. Over the next 30 years, they suffered from serious complications. On January 9, 1992, Jia Wen was executed by firing squad, and thus the shocking Nehe case finally came to an end.